There we are, fashionably late as always. Hi everyone, welcome to the 12th edition of Stories from the Block. We're super excited to have you here today, and thank you so much for joining us. I can see a few people joining the stream as we go. So why don't you get the chat active and let us know where you're joining us from today? We'd love to know that. But yeah, welcome to Stories from the Block. Since the start of this year, we've seen some new trends and big returns, and that's the theme of our event today. For example, we recently published our State of Content Management report, which offers a deep dive into what respondents from over 7 countries have to say about their CMS. Not only that, we also released our Total Economic Impact study together with Forrester, which was an amazing success. All of that and much more will be covered in today's event, and we don't want you to wait any longer. My name is Maria. I'm a demand generation team manager at Storyblok, and I would like you to meet my amazing friend and co-host, Christelle. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Maria, and hi, everyone. My name is Christelle, and I am a content marketing specialist at Storyblok. So before we begin, we would like to inform you that this event is entirely live, so we would strongly encourage you to ask any questions at any time in the comment section below, and excuse any mistakes we might make as hosts. Fingers crossed. But for our first segment, we would like to welcome our very own Julius Hemingway, our Analyst Relations Manager, and Michael Buzales, our Product Marketing Manager.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey guys.
Good to see you.
Nice to be with you all today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, we're really excited to hear all about the importance of effective content management and how scaling with Storyblok can really, yield huge returns for your business, specifically with the ROI of Storyblok, and the latest Forrester Total Economic Impact report, hot off the press.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
100%.
Super cool. Super cool.
So I think Michael's going to get us started as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Sounds good. Sounds good. Take it away, guys.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, Crystal. Thanks, Miriam. So this is a really special Stories from the Block, and we're really excited about it because it really gets to the core of what we do here at Storyblok and our mission, and more importantly, what our customers do with Storyblok and how it impacts their business. So before we get started, if you would allow me just to set a little bit of a context here, and to briefly explore the problem and the challenge that I think most of us as marketers and most companies face, and that is in a very complex digital world. How do we reach people who are being increasingly bombarded by content and by lots of digital noise, if you will? And really, this is an important question for business outcomes, because behind every click, every conversion rate, every KPI is a connection with a human being that who needs to be moved into action and to be engaged. So this is becoming quite a Herculean task in 2023. And let's briefly. The average internet user worldwide spends nearly 7. So, yikes. My compatriots spend nearly 11 hours per day consuming various types of media. And the average person sees around 70 ads per day across various digital platforms. So that's just to say that people are there's a lot of digital channels or platforms vying for people's attention. And this is getting only higher and more complex. So companies really need a way to cut through the digital noise and to reach people. And so how do we do that? Well, the most important factor, according to Google, is creating compelling and useful content. And this is from Google's SEO Starter Guide. And it sounds a little buzzy. What does compelling and useful content look like? The let's look at some of the technical factors. It needs to be really fast. So people need to be able to access your content. Improving load time by just 1.1 second can boost your conversion rate by 8%. And conversely, if your content takes more than 3 seconds to load, more than half your audience is likely going to abandon your site, according to a Google industry study. It also needs to speak to every audience. It needs to be personalized and tailored to people's language, their demographic, and what their interests are. And increasingly, people are expecting this. So 71% of consumers expect companies to deliver personalized interactions. And about 76% get frustrated when content isn't personalized to them. And it also needs to be accessible everywhere. It needs to be, and we've gone beyond just optimizing content for mobile or tablet, for instance. You need to go a step further than just squishing your desktop experience into a mobile experience. Really, if you think about it, the desktop experience and the mobile experience is completely different. The way we interact by clicking and by scrolling is a whole different way of interacting with content. And so really, you need to be able to design content that's unique to each platform and that's designed to harness the platform's capabilities and its user interface. So strong content strategies retains 89% of customers, and strong content strategies would be ones that are designed for each platform. So the challenge, so we just discussed, went through a few characteristics of good content. It's fast, it's personalized, it's omnichannel. This is really tough to pull off and involves a lot of really talented teams across many different disciplines. Depending on how complex your content experience might be, this might involve dozens, if not hundreds of people across technical, creative, and marketing teams. So really, we at Storyblok see this as the #1 driver to producing good content, and that by empowering your teams, each team at every stage of the content creation cycle, you can really get a significant business advantage by not only delivering great content, but as Julius will see, but even further than that, that it affects your actual business bottom line. The problem is that only 11 companies have cross-functional teams that can execute personalization campaigns across every channel. I got this from a recent study from the State of Personalization study, but I think it really rings true that we take these things for granted, that we even have the technology and the processes in place to deliver such content. And so at Storyblok, what we've set out to do is to empower teams at each stage of the content creation cycle and the delivery cycle with the tools and processes they need to be able to deliver better content. And for each team, this is different. So for instance, for developers, we help developers need freedom. They need to be able to adapt to a very kind of a fast evolving technological world. So that is why Storyblok is composable and headless, to be able for developers to be able to scale their tech stack and their content operations without limits. For creatives, they have different pain points. They need to be able to work independently without having to rely on developers and tech teams. So for that reason, we are a visual CMS. We have a visual editor. We've added a digital asset manager that's native to our platform, and we've added a array of content operation workflows built right into our visual editor to allow creatives and content teams to publish faster and go to market faster. And finally, for marketers, it's critical to be able to deliver better audience experiences, like we've just mentioned. That is to say, that are personalized, that are fast and omnichannel. And so with our headless CMS and with our API first integrations, all teams are able to integrate with other third-party solutions, increase their performance, and deliver to where their customers are, and depending on which is also changing at a very rapid pace. Now, all of these factors and all of the by empowering your teams, you're able to deliver better content and better experiences to your audience. But as we mentioned before, these have a profound effect on your business outcomes as well. And so I'm going to pass it on to my dear colleague, Julius, who is going to speak a little bit about how Storyblok customers have used all of these capabilities to reach incredible levels of success and to their bottom line. Julius?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So yeah, that was really, really interesting, and essentially, speaks very much to some of the challenges and some of the ideas that ultimately inspired much of Storyblok, much of the product that we have at Storyblok, and our overall strategy and how we've gone to market over the past few years. Now, we know that we solve a lot of these challenges, and we know that we, provide a lot of value to many of our customers. But we've always felt that it's one thing to hear, Storyblok talk about that, to hear Storyblok mention the differentiation that we can make for our customers. But what we really ultimately wanted to do is we wanted to provide and arm our prospects, our customers, with necessary information so that they could make the best possible decisions when investing into their content management strategy, when trying to solve some of the challenges that Michael was also talking about just now. And in order to effectively do this, in order to effectively validate what we've been working on over the last few years and how we go to market, we contracted Forrester in order to write what is called a total economic impact study, to analyze our CMS. And Forrester spoke to some of our customers, and essentially the idea was to measure the return on investment that a composite organization of these 4 companies could possibly expect when implementing Storyblok CMS, and more importantly also to understand a little bit more where exactly are the benefits that businesses get when implementing Storyblok. And it was very nice to see essentially what Forrester confirmed. Essentially what Forrester was confirming was that there was 582% return on investment for businesses after being interviewed by Forrester, and that businesses would make back about would make back their initial investment within 6 months after implementing Storyblok. You can kind of see where the main areas and where the main areas of benefit are that Forrester found as well, in terms of the time to market. So how much quicker it was for businesses to now go to market, because they finally had different teams collaborating more effectively in order to be able to put out content much more rapidly. Second of all, the efficiencies that were gained due to the deployment setup. So the fact that because this was now a headless content management system, businesses were able to be on many more channels, were now cloud-based, all those sorts of things. And finally, and most importantly, having a single source of content management. What that ultimately refers to is that many businesses will have to rely on what's called a multi-CMS strategy, so that it means that they implement several content management systems in order to serve the various channels that they're working with. The great benefit of implementing something like Storyblok and a headless content management system, in combination with the first 2 points that I mentioned, is that businesses essentially at this point only need to work on one platform with Storyblok's collaboration features, all those sorts of things. And the fact that it's headless and as such is able to play to all the various channels. At the end of the day, businesses only require one content management system in order to effectively serve not only all their channels, but ultimately also all of their customers. So what I want to do is, more importantly, I want to also double click on some of the unquantified benefits that have been mentioned in the report, which are highlighted on this slide specifically, which really speak to not just where Forrester was able to measure the benefit, as you saw on the slide that I showed just now, but ultimately also some benefits that Forrester had recognized Storyblok delivers, without there sometimes being possible to assign a numerical value to that. And that really kind of divided up in four main areas, which was the fact that content operations were much more scalable because of collaboration features such as discussions and comments, but also elements such as custom workflows. The fact that content practitioner experiences were much improved due to the visual editor, the in-context preview, and the component approach, which enabled non-technical people ultimately to work with the platform as well. Then ultimately the localization features, such as translation features, and the fact that as a result, businesses were much more able to service their global audiences. And finally, the increased customer engagement. So what Forrester found, and this was something that came to us as a surprise almost as well, was the fact that our clients reported that their customers ended up spending more time on the website because content was being updated more regular, because there was more engagement, and because the website was just running faster and being safer. So what we found as well ultimately is that Storyblok delivered way more trust to our clients and some real results as well. So that was, in a very short bit, the main benefits that we found with the research, and that Forrester found in doing that research together with Storyblok and our customers. We're very excited that we got to see how these benefits were validated by Forrester, and more importantly, how all of these benefits ultimately tie into many of the challenges that we hear from customers time and time again about how difficult it is to work on several content management systems, how having third-party applications that they need to use in order to manage their content will create difficulties and will cause them to lose certain content. And ultimately, how Storyblok has really helped these businesses scale their storytelling. So thank you very much for listening to us today, to me and Michael. If there's any specific questions that you would have, we'll be here for a couple more minutes. And otherwise, we can ping it back to Maria and Christelle.
Thank you, guys. Hi. Thank you so much. What an amazing talk to start us off. And yeah, thank you so much. It's incredible to see that customers received a 582% return on investment over the 3 years, and less than 6 month payback for managing and scaling content with Storyblok. So what a great way to propel better customer experiences through scalable content operations. And yeah, thank you so much, Julius and Michael.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you. What you also just saw pop in was a link to download the report. Maybe we can put in the QR code again, so you have time to scan it and download the full report on our website. But yeah, well, thank you, Sid. Next up, please bring a warm welcome to our next speaker, who is our very own Jillian Mays, content creator at Storyblok. Jillian is the person, who recently polled and explored 1,600 respondents from 7 countries in how organizations use the content management system.
Hey, Jillian.
How are you?
Good. Excited to get started. Going good.
Great.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for the introduction once again, guys. Like they said, my name is Jillian Mays, and I'm a content creator here at Blok. Part of my job is to conduct research and write reports relating to CMSs and how they're being used. So for this edition of Stories from the Block, I wanted to talk about one of our recent bigger projects, the State of CMS for 2023. Through this study, we discovered a lot of important info about how CMS users think and behave in 2023, and we're hoping it provides a unique window into current and future trends. So in this talk, I will be covering why we conducted the study in the first place, a few key findings from it, and what they could all mean for the future of CMS. So let's go ahead and start with the why. Why did we do this in the first place? What were we trying to learn? Changes in the CMS industry are really important to keep up with. Knowing what's going on helps you avoid common problems that maybe other people are running into. It helps you stay ahead of the curve on trends and such. And in general, the better you understand the area you're working in, the better of a user experience you can provide. But the challenge comes in the keeping up with part. The industry changes all the time. It's the nature of the beast. You've got new features coming out all the time, new technologies, new programs, and then user demands for what they want to see in their CMS are also developing over time. So we wanted to provide an accurate, updated resource that could reflect the current industry. This meant we needed to learn how users around the world leverage their CMSs, meaning what they liked, what challenges they ran into, and what their plans for the future are. Our methodology for this included polling over 1,600 respondents from across 7 countries. We gathered that data, analyzed it, compiled those results, and then drew conclusions from them. Now, before I get started in earnest, I want to let you know that what you're about to watch is just a taste of what we have found with this study. If you want to get the full report, you can download the free report for the full results or attend a webinar with myself and VP of Marketing Thomas Mayhem happening on May 3rd. You can scan the QR code right there. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to 3 key findings from the State of CMS 2023. We're going to start with a very basic one to get us started. What type of CMS are respondents using? This is important because it is the very core of your system. It affects all other aspects of how you're using it and impacts the rest of your content. The options here, as you can see, were monolithic, headless, or other. Other includes page builders, web apps, custom CMSs, anything that doesn't neatly fall into the headless or monolithic category. As you can see from the results up here, 48% of people were using monolithic CMS, 16% were using other, and 36% were using headless. For technology that is still relatively new, it is a pretty impressive statistic to be sitting at 36% of the entire sample using headless. This is also if you compare it to 2022's results. Compared to 2022, 1% more people are using headless and 2% less are using monolithic. This shows that more people are using headless and less people are using monolithic, of course. And even if you want to consider that those small percentage differences from 2022 aren't too significant, at very least, we're still in a holding pattern of people maintaining their interest in headless, which is a positive sign. Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and move on to our second point and our next slide. How many people are using multiple CMSs and why? So we touched on this a little bit in the last speakers, but the use of multiple CMSs isn't uncommon, and unfortunately, it does bring some problems. If your platforms aren't connected, you end up with content siloing. Your data is going to be isolated to individual platforms. It can't easily be shared. You can't do as much with it as you might want to. You're left without any kind of centralized management, and it leads to unnecessarily complicated admin on the back end for everyone involved. Basically, with multiple CMSs, you're trying to take separate, distinct moving parts and make them operate as one without that connective tissue that would really make that make sense. This leads to inconsistent content delivery across channels and inefficiency behind the scenes. Despite this, as you can see from this graph, a really surprising 57% of the samples still said they used 2 or more CMSs. So that made us wonder, with all those downsides that come attached to it, what could possibly be the motivator? So we asked what the top 3 reasons were, and spoiler alert, they all tie into monolithic usage. So let's take a look at the next slide. The most commonly cited reason up there was to minimize delivery risk. This could be the result of having backups or trying to reach multiple front ends with multiple systems. Basically, people are wanting assurance of data that multiple single CMSs aren't really able to provide. The second most common answer up there was the need for a new technology stack. Monolithic systems are okay for some things. If you have a very simple, straightforward setup, that might be all you need. But one thing they are not built to do is adapt. The all-in-one setup makes things only really operate if you don't need that much customization or changing. If you do need to add new technology or programs to a monolithic system, the rigid structure means that doing so is going to be a difficult process. It's probably going to be expensive, and thanks to the fact that it's an all-in-one setup, it could pose a risk to the rest of your technology ecosystem, because an error in one area can bring down the whole system. And that's obviously less than ideal. So instead of dealing with taking one monolithic CMS and modifying it so that it can do what that new technology stack needs it to do, it seems that some users are just adding on an auxiliary CMS. Rather than get involved with modifying an old one, they're just adding on a separate new one. Try and bypass that roadblock a little bit. And then our third most common reason up there was omnichannel capabilities. Omnichannel is simply essential to modern marketing these days. People expect it from brands. They want to be able to access your organization whenever, wherever, however they want. If you're not providing that, you are missing out on a lot of opportunities. But unfortunately, if you're using a monolithic system, the backend is so tightly tied to the front end that it's very similarly to adding a new technology stack. It is extremely difficult to add a new omnichannel onto a monolithic system. So instead, similar to the last point, people will just add another CMS on to make better use of it instead. Now, what all 3 of these have in common is that they're basically workarounds. They're jerry-rigging. They're just ways to compensate for an inflexible, unadaptable monolithic system. And clearly there's a lot of people using it already, but while this might work in the short run, it's really just a band-aid. It's not going to fix the underlying problem. And as you add more CMSs, the disorganization is only going to grow. So you have consequences that are compounding with a problem that isn't getting solved. It is worth noting here that all 3 of these issues can be bypassed if you're using a single headless CMS. So this itself could be an indicator that headless usage will be increasing in the future as people kind of realize this. And for our last section, let's go to the last slide. And we're going to see what platforms and channels are currently being served. We wanted to know where CMS users are currently reaching their audiences and how they plan to in the future. This is another element that relies very heavily on the type of CMS being used. Obviously, the more channels that you're intending to reach, the more essential it is to have a CMS that can access all of those easily and effectively. The top 3 results you see here are not surprising. You've got websites, mobile applications, and e-commerce platforms / storefronts in that order. This is not a surprise to anyone, I'm pretty sure. These are very common among users. It doesn't tell us a lot that we don't already know. The more interesting bit is with the rest of the results, the Internet of Things options. These are in less numbers than the top 3, but they're still very clearly present in the sample. Their popularity ranking was in this order: in-store digital screens, voice-activated speakers like Alexa, AR and VR, and smartwatches. This snapshot is interesting because it helps reflect some current omnichannel efforts in part right now. These are the omnichannel Internet of Things options that people are accessing currently. There is a definite interest shown in expanding to those less traditional channels, something that goes beyond the website and goes more into technology that is still newer to some people. And then we also took this question and we applied it to future plans, which you can see in the next slide here. And I want to once again focus on the Internet of Things options here. Interestingly, more people were planning on using in-store digital screens and smartwatches than currently do. So these are two channels that I definitely recommend keeping an eye on for 2023. We might see some increase as people start to make concrete actions on these interests. In the same vein, you might want to also be paying attention to CMSs that can best support omnichannel, because as interest in omnichannel continues to grow and appreciation for it continues to grow, people are going to be more interested in actually taking advantage of the benefits that it has to offer. Okay, and with that, I can go ahead and wrap things up on my end. The parts of the study that we've covered today suggest a really bright future for headless. It solves the need for multiple CMSs. It helps users serve increasingly popular platforms, and more users are choosing it than ever before. But once again, we have only just scratched the surface here. There's a lot more to learn. If you want to learn more, you can attend our dedicated webinar where myself and Storyblock VP of Marketing Thomas Pahen will be diving into the research details to fully understand the state of CMS in 2023. And the link is right there once again. That is it for my part of Stories from the Block. Thanks for your time, everyone. Back to you, Crystal and Maria.
Thank you, Jillian. What a great insight into how organizations worldwide use their content management system. It's really an all-in-one study that I can only recommend, and it shows that headless is the future, and it's already here. So thank you so much, Jillian. It was amazing to have you.
Of course, thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jillian. And we at Storyblock strongly believe that headless is the future, and in building the right tool for all teams, giving flexibility and independence to developers, marketers, and content creators alike. It's why making sure you have a future-proof setup and tools to ready you for anything the future has to bring is very important. So the Mach Alliance is just that, advocating for the best of breed enterprise technologies made for the future. We dive in with John Pearson today from our partner agency, Profound.
Hi, John. Thanks for being here today with us.
Hi there. Hi, everybody.
We're excited to explore and find out more about the potential ROI behind making the switch to a Mach adoption. So with that, we'll hand it over to you.
Perfect. Okay. I think there's some slides that somebody has control of. If you can bring up the first few. Okay. That's great. So just a quick introduction. My name's John Pearson. I'm a director and co-founder here at Profound. We're an experience design agency based in the UK. We're also a Storyblock partner, and we focus on helping brands and businesses, both retail and B2B, to implement and successfully deploy Mach technologies. That's headless microservices systems. So that's just a brief kind of introduction. If we move to the next slide, just picking up on some of the things that Jillian was highlighting, one thing we've noticed over recent years is this dramatic shift in the way we all consume content these days. It's on multiple channels, it's on multiple devices. We see increasing use of things like, voice and wearables and kiosks and so forth. And this is cutting into a lot of different sectors. So if we go to the next slide, for instance, in the retail arena, where obviously the focus is very much B2C, we see increasing innovation with things like augmented reality and VR. Moving on to the next slide, in the area of B2B, we see manufacturers who are seeking better ways to provide experiences to their B2B clients, be that through specific apps or mobile apps or business portals. Moving on, we also see manufacturers going direct to consumer. So there's this proliferation of channels, this proliferation of devices, and that's the kind of backdrop that we as businesses, brands, and organizations are trying to address in terms of delivering a customer experience. But if you look at the way a lot of businesses, and the statistics held this up as shown a little bit earlier, the way things are moving currently, there's this trend to kind of cling on to the old monolithic world. And if we move to the next slide, I'll just touch a little bit on this. So what we see in the monolithic approach is a kind of historic or traditional view that if you have an all-in-one system, it's going to solve all my problems. And historically, that had its place. But what we see is a shift, moving away from this. But these all-in-one systems have their advantages in as much as potentially there's a lot in there, but they also have a lot of disadvantages, and they're really starting to come home, some of those challenges. The biggest one we see is that it is essentially a single slab of code base where you've got in one place your content, your page templates, your data, your business logic, and you've got the front end and the back end really tightly tied together. Now, if you're looking at this from a cost and an ROI perspective, if we move to the next slide, and you're starting to think about, well, if we change this approach, and we want to try to understand what could be the potential ROI of this change, you need to understand, first of all, what you're dealing with today in order to make the comparison. And in order to make that assessment, you've got to look at your monolithic world and think, well, what is that actually costing us in terms of the license approach? You know, is there a huge perpetual license that you're paying? What about upgrades? Typically, with these monolithic applications, you have an often not insignificant upgrade project. Not only is that often costly, particularly if you've got lots of customizations, it can also be very disruptive. It can take a long time, and it could delay a lot of your competitive advantage. You've then got the maintenance and hosting. Often you're looking after the infrastructure and trying to deal with all of that. You've got the cost of change over time. I'm going to come back to that point because it's very significant in just a moment. Often you're also typically working with a whole series of modules, but you're underusing a lot of them. We see this a lot, particularly in the CMS space, where clients have perhaps adopted a DXP, a digital experience platform, and the phrase we hear so often is, we're only using 10% of its capability. And often that's because a lot of modules were added in. They're probably suboptimal in terms of the core strength of that system, and so they tend to get underused. Well, that's a lot of wasted money in this context. You've then got the speed to market and the ability to experiment. Is that easy with these monolithic applications? How much design freedom do you have? Or actually, are you tied by the rigid page templates that you're working with? And are you suffering things like content freezes and delays while you're waiting for developers to do the things they need to do and get the QA through in order for you to actually do things on the front end? So you've then got to think about, well, how easy is it to launch into all these new channels that people are now adopting? And it was an interesting stat there about the number of CMSs, particularly their proliferation, because people just don't have trust. They feel they have to build something new for each particular channel. If we move on to the next slide, I just want to focus on the cost of change over time, because often if you are doing the maths, you really need to include that total cost of change. So if you think about the applications that you have in place today, think about over the years the time and cost that has been absorbed to do things like add new features, integrate a new application, fix bugs, add new releases, maybe making adjustments to the customer experience, or adding or amending customizations, or even trying to launch into a new channel. You've also got the cost of development and QA, managing dependencies. And often that's because you have a very tightly coupled technical architecture inside these monolithic applications. So if you make a change in one area, it has a knock-on effect on dependent functionality, which extends the development time, the testing time, and causes delay and disruption for business users when they're trying to get things out of the door. So these are all costs that you need to consider when you're making these assessments about bringing in new technologies. If we move to the next slide, just to highlight what MAC is for those who are not aware. So in essence, it's a technology approach that many technology vendors, exactly like Storyblok, have adopted these days. And it's essentially taking a microservices, API first, cloud native, headless approach. So that's what the MAC stands for. If we move on to the next slide, a picture always tells a tale far better in my view. So what does this look like in real life? Well, typically you will have a front end separated from a back end by an API layer, or that's your, if you like, a mediation layer or an integration layer through which data and content is orchestrated. What it means is, because you're separating that front end, you can really go to town on designing the perfect customer experience on multiple front ends, be that your website, your business portal, the mobile app, the kiosk, your chatbot, social channels, AR, VR, and so on and so on. So you can design that front end and it won't be constrained by those back end components. And in the back end, you can compose an architecture that consists of best of breed applications. So that might be the CMS in perhaps Storyblock, or indeed it could be an e-commerce engine, a product information management system, a DAM, and so forth. So this separation of concerns is really vital to understand because it has a lot of benefit and brings a lot of advantage to the way you do things. If we move on to the next slide, one of the advantages, just thinking about launching into new channels. So if you remain with that monolith approach, you often have to build an entire application just to enter a specific channel. So you need to build something unique for your mobile app or unique for that business portal. And that becomes a real overhead in the business. If you go the Mac route, you just simply adapt the back-end components that you have to suit the front end. So you have that central control, but the freedom to render and display content and or transactions, whatever it is you need to do at the front end through that API layer. Another dimension, if you're looking at the overall costs of bringing in this this type of approach, is your ways of working. So if we move to the next slide, people when they're deploying these types of systems or any kind of application in the business will tend to work in one of two ways, either big bang, so you do a lot of upfront discovery, requirements gathering and specification, and then you go into a dark hole for 6 or 8 months doing design and build, and at the far end you do some testing and then you launch. The other route, which is often more attractive and we see more commonly deployed, is working in an agile way. So you will quickly do some discovery and perhaps a proof of concept, and then move into an iterative approach of sprints where you're delivering value a lot earlier in the process. And if that's your preferred way of working, you can actually adapt the advantages that Mac technologies bring by gracefully strangling out some of the components in your existing architecture and decompose the things that you no longer need and replace it with best of breed components, like for instance, the CMS or a DAM or a PIM or whatever it might be. So another dimension to this, if we move to the next slide, is that early start of that process. So if you do work in that agile way, you can actually remove quite a lot of cost in the RFP process. We see organizations all the time invest huge amounts and a large amount of time and effort and money simply creating an RFP, all the requirements, documentation, and so on and so forth. You can often get started an awful lot quicker by rapidly working up some discovery, focus on the customer experience and some user stories, create a proof of concept, and work with some of these Mac technologies, and you're off to a flyer because you're very quickly delivering value much earlier. So you can remove that cost and see value a lot earlier, working in an agile way and working with these Mac technologies. So it's just something to consider in the mix in the context of the overall costs and your ways of working. If we move to the next slide, where does the overall upside come when you're working with Mac technologies? Well, we see it broadly in two areas: efficiency and growth. So in terms of efficiency, the thing that's removed immediately is upgrade projects. And that's not to be underestimated because these can be hugely expensive. As I touched on earlier, if you're working in this model, you're working with vendors who are providing releases either daily or weekly. So the whole notion of an upgrade project just disappears. You also move to a subscription licensing model, which can be a lot more attractive than the perpetual license model, which is often good news for your CFO. You're also shifting a lot of the responsibility to the vendors because the vendors are providing the hosting and a lot of the headaches that go with that. You're also moving to a code agnostic development scenario. So it doesn't matter what code language you're using on the front end, it can be different to the back end. And what that also means is that you don't necessarily have to find those unique, often very expensive unicorn type developers who are deep specialists in a particular application. In our experience, if you have a good set of front-end developers or full stack developers who understand working with APIs, you can go an awful long way to put in place a really solid Mac solution. It also creates less low-value maintenance, so you're not doing low-value tasks, managing all the infrastructure, and your development gets a lot faster. In terms of growth, that means you can get to market a lot quicker. You've also got the create once, publish anywhere notion, and that's hugely valuable, not just in the context of, say, content and feeding it out to websites, but also things like being more innovative, perhaps with your e-commerce. Maybe you want to embrace conversational commerce, or surface your checkout in areas of high buying intent, maybe in social channels or through WhatsApp and all that sort of thing. You can facilitate that far more easily by having a solid Mac architecture as your back-end capability feeding into those front ends. And with that front end, you are unconstrained. So you're not going to be held back by page templates constraining you in any way. You can carry on and do the front end piece in a really solid way and service that customer experience in the right way. It gives you more time to innovate, which means you get more motivated staff, and you're future-proofing that experience design piece at the front end. We as a business were very motivated by Mac and the architecture it brings, not so much because it's an exciting technology, but actually for what it facilitates. And what it facilitates is a separated front end that is not constrained by those back-end systems. And that means you can genuinely invest in understanding the customer journey, the pain points, the motivators, and then designing a UX that's very attractive and compelling to increase conversion with the audience that you're trying to reach. So if you take it from that perspective, a Mac architecture just makes huge sense for better addressing customer experience needs. If we move on to the next slide, we've got a few pointers here just for the way we help clients think about not just the ROI, but the whole process of adopting a Mac approach. And we like to think of these 7 points, and that's starting with the strategic goals that you're thinking about, the customer experience you want to create, your business user experience. And one thing Storyblok is fantastic at is delivering that business user experience. Your future state technology architecture, what does it need to look like? Who will be implementing the platform? Do you want to do it yourselves? Do you want to work with a partner? Do you want to do it as an augmented team? What's the best way to do that? How will you be rolling out the new platform? Will you be doing it in a big bang approach, or do you want to take that slightly more steady as she goes, strangled out approach? There's a number of ways to do it. And then think about the budget that you're able to apply to that, taking into account all of the costs of your current systems and so on. And then finally, just to wrap up, as a business, we like to help people along this journey wherever we can. So on the next slide, you'll see we've got a number of things that we can provide to help. We've got an ebook on adopting the right CMS platform. We've got a free headless bootcamp, which expands it out to not just the CMS, but thinking about your whole architecture. That's a unique offer for people attending this session. So do get in touch with the team and it'll feed through to us, and we're happy to have a conversation. Or if you just need some help thinking about your wider technology selection across the whole Mac architecture, we can help out in that context. But hopefully that's given you a few pointers about the adoption of Mac technologies, what we see in the marketplace in terms of its usage, but of the costs and perspectives associated with that. So hopefully that's helpful, and I'll hand back to the team.
Thank you, John. That was awesome. If our audience would like to learn more and reach you and Profound, what would be the best way of getting in touch?
Well, either email anyone from this invite and it'll find its way to me, or reach me at.
Amazing, awesome. Thank you so much, John, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, John. And there you have it. We have reached the end of our Stories from the Blok webinar today. And it was an absolute delight to have you on with us. And we hope you enjoyed your time with us today.
Be sure to check out our website for future editions of Stories from the Blok, as well as many more amazing webinars we are hosting in the coming weeks. There's even a ticket giveaway happening in next week's sneak peek that you can see here about the OMR Festival, and you definitely don't want to miss that. So yeah, finally, before we go, all of us who you've seen here in today's event would like to wish Kevin, who is managing the backstage today, a very happy birthday today. Thank you, Kevin, for spending your birthday with us and everyone in the audience today.
Great, and happy birthday, Kevin. Until next time, take care, and thanks for joining us. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.